You knew what kind of evening it was going to be before anyone said a word. You could feel it in the way the front door closed. Not slammed, not gently either, somewhere in between, and that in between told you everything. You knew by the weight of footsteps in the hallway, by the way a glass was set down on the counter, whether it was placed or dropped. You learned the difference between a silence that meant peace and a silence that meant something was about to come apart. And you were 5, maybe 6, maybe younger than that. You didn't have language for what you were doing. You didn't call it reading a room. You called it Tuesday. If some part of you recognized that instantly, stay with me. This one may put language to something you've been doing your entire life without ever being taught. Most people think of reading a room as a social skill, something you pick up in your 20s at dinner parties and work meetings, something charming. Copy of emotional intelligence. But for some people, it was never a skill. It was a requirement. You didn't learn to read a room because someone sat you down and explained body language. You learned because the room was the weather forecast, and the weather determined everything. How loud you could be, how visible, how much space you were allowed to take up. You learned that a certain tightness around your mother's mouth meant tonight was not the night to ask for anything. That your father's posture in a doorframe could tell you whether to speak or disappear. And here's the thing most people don't understand. You weren't reading the room for information. You were reading it for safety. That is a fundamentally different thing. There's a concept in developmental psychology called hypervigilance, a state in which the nervous system stays on alert for potential threat, scanning constantly for shifts in environment, tone, expression. It's well documented. Researchers at Stanford Center on Stress and Health have studied it extensively. And what they found is that people who grow up in unpredictable emotional environments often develop a heightened sensitivity to microexpressions, the tiny, involuntary shifts in someone's face that last a fraction of a second. A slight tightening of the jaw, a half-second delay in a smile. Most people miss these entirely. You catch them like a reflex. The amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for processing threat and emotional significance, learns, in these environments, to flag things earlier, faster, with more granularity than the average person. Not because something is wrong with it, because it was trained early. It was trained by necessity, by repetition, by the fact that for you, noticing wasn't optional, it was how you stayed okay. And this isn't abstract. You've lived it. You know what it feels like to walk into a room and have your body do a full scan before your conscious mind has even decided whether to take off your jacket. Your shoulders shift. Your breathing changes. Something behind your ribs quietly rearranges itself depending on who is in that room and what energy they brought with them. You do this in meetings, in restaurants, in your best friend's kitchen. You do it so fast, so automatically, that you don't even register it as effort anymore. It just feels like being alive. And people notice the result without ever seeing the process. They call you perceptive, empathetic, emotionally intelligent, the one who always knows the right thing to say, the one who can walk into a tense room and somehow make it easier for everyone. And you are all of those things, but they don't know what it cost you. They don't know that your so-called gift was built in rooms where you had no choice but to pay attention, that your empathy wasn't cultivated. It was conscripted, because the same system that makes you excellent at reading others can make you terrible at resting. Your nervous system doesn't turn off just because the room is safe now. It keeps scanning, at the grocery store, at a friend's birthday, in your own living room, with people who love you and have never once raised their voice. You are still reading the room, every room, all the time, and that is exhausting in a way that most people will never understand, because from the outside, you just look thoughtful. Let that sit for a second. There's another layer to this that doesn't get talked about enough. When you grow up calibrating yourself to the emotional states of others, something subtle happens to your sense of self. You become extraordinarily attuned to what other people need, and you become strangely disconnected from what you need. Because in those early rooms, the ones that taught you everything, your needs were not the priority. The priority was stability. The priority was making sure nothing exploded. And the fastest way to do that was to become invisible, adaptable, easy. Psychologists sometimes call this a fawn response, A survival strategy where the nervous system learns that the safest thing to do in an unpredictable environment is to become whatever the environment needs, to agree, to soothe, to shrink. And it works. It works beautifully, actually. It gets you through childhood. I as they can more cessed. It makes you the person everyone trusts, everyone leans on, everyone calls when things fall apart. But it also means that decades later, when someone asks you what you want for dinner, you sometimes genuinely don't know, not because you're indecisive, because for a very long time, what you wanted was never the relevant question. It means you can spend an entire evening with people you love, people who are safe, who have proven it 100 times, and still come home drained, not because the evening was bad, because you never stopped working. You were tracking every pause, every shift in eye contact, every subtle change in someone's laughter. You were running a program in the background that nobody asked you to run, but you couldn't stop it even if you tried. Because the program was installed before you were old enough to know it was running. And the loneliest part, you can't explain this to most people. Because from the outside, you just look like someone who's good with people. You look easy, graceful, natural. Nobody sees the machinery. Nobody sees the cost. Here's where I want to be honest with you. Because this part matters. Not every version of this story is the same. Some people who read rooms early did so because of genuine instability at home. Some did it because they were simply born more sensitive, what researcher Aron calls a highly sensitive person, or a nervous system wired from birth to process stimuli more deeply, more thoroughly, more carefully than the average person. Not because of trauma, because of biology. And some people are both, sensitive by nature, shaped by environment. The two are not mutually exclusive. What matters is not the origin. What matters is what you do with the awareness now. Because here is the part that requires honesty. Reading a room is a real skill. It can protect you. It can make you kinder, more empathetic, more present than most people will ever be. But it can also become a cage, a pattern so deep that you forget you're doing it. You walk into a room, and before you've even registered your own feelings, you've already mapped everyone else's. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that mapping becomes a way of avoiding your own interior. It's easier to focus on everyone else's emotional state than to sit with your own. It's easier to ask, "Are they okay?" than to ask, "Am I okay?" Because the first question has always felt useful, and the second one has always felt dangerous. So I want you to ask yourself this, with no judgment, just quiet curiosity. Are you reading the room because you want to, or because you still don't feel safe enough to stop? There's a difference between awareness and surveillance, between empathy and erasure, between being attuned to others and being absent from yourself. And the fact that you can even ask that question means you're already further along than you think. Because here's what I want you to hear, not as advice, not as a pep talk, but as something I genuinely believe to be true, the thing you learn to do in order to survive. It is also the thing that makes you irreplaceable in the lives of the people who love you. You notice things. You feel things. You hold space for complexity in a world that prefers everything simple and loud. That is not a flaw. That is not a wound that needs fixing, but it is something that deserves to be turned inward too. The same attention you give to every room you walk into. You are allowed to give that attention to yourself. To ask what you need. To notice your own silence and take it seriously. You have spent years, maybe your whole life, being the person who makes other people feel safe, the one who adjusts, the one who notices when the energy shifts and quietly moves to steady it. And you are so good at it that most people have no idea what it takes. But here is what I want you to know. You don't have to earn the right to be in a room by monitoring it. You are allowed to just be there, to sit down, to not scan, to let the room do whatever the room is going to do, and trust that you will be okay in it. That might sound simple, but if you are the person this video was made for, you know it is one of the hardest things anyone could ask of you. Start small. The next time you walk into a room, before you scan it, pause. One breath. Ask yourself, how do I feel right now? Not them, you. It might take a while to hear an answer. That's okay. The answer has been waiting. You spent your whole life making sure everyone else in the room was okay. You are allowed to check on yourself with that same tenderness. If this made you feel seen in a way you weren't expecting, leave a comment. Not for me. For the person scrolling through at 2 in the morning, who still reads every room they enter and has never once told anyone why.